Indeed. So unfortunately, things came up last week I didn't expect. So we're maybe a little bit rusty. Our memories might be a little bit foggy, but we've been um, working through Plato's Phaedo dialogue for those listening and following online. We're in the third reading session. I'm not too sure how many reading sessions it's going to be. I'm always bad at estimating, so I'm not going to throw that out there. Um, there's been a lot that we've gone through, and Jerry will grace us with a little bit of a recap of some of the essential points that we should all just hold in our minds as we go forward into the question of, is there such a thing as a soul? If so, what is its nature? What does it do? And is it mortal or as finite as our body or several bodies may be carried over? Jerry, help us out.
Okay, I gotta find my notes from last week.
Yes.
Oh, just a little quick thing I wanted to tell everybody about the translation that we're reading is by Harold North Fowler, and he was born in 1859. So that was like a year before, Lincoln gets elected. In fact, 1859. That's when that guy Lincoln is traveling around Illinois, going to all these clubs, giving a speech about discoveries and inventions. That's the one Matt likes a lot, The universe is a mine, and every one of us is a miner. So that's when he's born in 1859. So he grows up, young kid, lives through the Civil War. He lives until 1955 when he's 96. He dies at 96. So he lives through World War II, FDR. The interesting thing about him, he goes to Harvard, and then in 1881, he goes to the American School of Classical Studies at Athens in Greece. They had just opened the school. This was the first class, so he was one of the first students to go there. So he studied Greek. He became a classical philologist, and he also discovered archaeology. He's studying archaeology in Athens, and this is at the time when this guy Heinrich Schliemann has just discovered Troy, and they're doing the whole excavation of Troy. So that must have been just fascinating. So, and then from there he goes to University of Berlin to get his PhD. I think Max Planck had just got his maybe a year or two before, so they're a similar age, similar thinking. Then he comes back to the United States. He gets a few jobs teaching. Then he gets a job as a professor teaching Greek at the College for Women at Western Reserve University in Cleveland. And this is at a time, my wife was telling me about it, when women weren't accepted at university. They were actually considered inferior intellectually to men. There was a big fight about this. So this guy is actually teaching at the College for Women. So that's funny.
Huh.
So, and that's when he does his translations of Plato's dialogues, a number of other things while he's at the women's college. So
which state is that in?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah. So fascinating guy. I like his translations. They're easy to read, easy to understand. So I just wanted to give that little plug for him. Okay, my notes from last reading. That's when Socrates is talking about the immortality of the soul, and Cebes and Simmias are still kind of in doubt about whether he's right or not. And Socrates says, "Oh, so you think I'm inferior to the prophetic power of the swans?" This is the discussion of the swans we got into. That this, he says, the swans sing best when they think they're going to die, and they're joyful that they're going to see Apollo. He's the guardian of the swans. So I was doing some research in that. Apparently, according to hunters, that when a swan dies, their lungs collapse, and as their lungs collapse, they actually emit these notes. So it's this idea that they sing when they're going to die, and we have this saying, swan song. So it's actually got some truth in reality.
Hmm.
But also, there's an Aesop fable, The Swan and the Goose, which is about the swan saving himself by singing, showing he's not a goose. And in the dialogue, remember, Socrates says he was sitting in prison waiting to die, and so he got a copy of Aesop's fables and he was reading them, and some of them he actually set to verse. So I think that's probably where that come from. But that was our whole discussion of swans we had last week. So, okay, back to Cebes and Simmias. So Simmias starts talking about harmony. He says harmony is like the soul. If you have a lyre with strings, they're kind of like mortal, they're corporeal. Whereas harmony is like immortality, it's invisible. And if the lyre gets busted or the strings get cut, according to Socrates' argument, the harmony must still exist after that. But according to Simmias, if the soul is a harmony or a mixture of things that make up a body, that the soul must perish first. And the body, the lyre is strings, they're still there, but they kind of decay over time. So he has a different idea of immortality. And so then Socrates says, well, okay, we'll discuss this, but we can't get caught in this thing he called misology, which I'd never heard of. Hatred of argument or a hatred of reasoning. And he says, when a man without proper knowledge thinks something is true and later thinks that it's false, whether it is or not, doesn't matter. He thinks there's nothing certain in anything. He doesn't know. It's this idea of skepticism. And all it leads to is probabilities. And Socrates says this is really misology, that instead of blaming himself for his lack of skill, he blames reasoning. And so that was misology. So then they go back to discuss harmony. And Socrates says, well, if harmony is a mixture, how could it exist before things that it is a mixture of? So the soul cannot be a mixture or a harmony of things that don't exist yet. So Simmias, harmony is only probable. It's only a probability. And he says, can something be in greater harmony or lesser harmony? He goes, yes. Can a soul be a greater or lesser soul? And he says, no. All souls are equally good. So soul is not a harmony, but it actually leads the body. So I was doing some research again on this harmony thing. So it turns out Harmonia is the name of a goddess. And she was the wife of Cadmus, and Cadmus was the founder of Thebes. So Harmonia was the goddess of Thebes. Cebes and Simmias are from Thebes. So Socrates is kind of doing this little playing with them about harmony because they're from Thebes. So then they continue with Cebes saying, well, he believes that the soul existed before birth, or at least for a long time, but he doesn't believe yet the idea that the soul is immortal after death. So Socrates says, well, we have to investigate the cause of generation and of decay. And then he goes into this thing about 1 and 1 equals 2. If you have 1 and you have them together, they're 2. Or if you take 1 and rip it apart, then you get 2. So you don't know if 1 and 1 is 2 or if 1 divided in half makes 2. So then he talks about, he read a book by Anaxagoras. And I was wrong about Pericles. Apparently, Anaxagoras was a teacher of Pericles. That was the connection.
Hmm.
So he somehow got a hold of a book by him, and it said, "It is the mind that arranges and causes all things." And he thought that was very good. And he wanted to find out what sort of existence is best for it. But he says, Anaxagoras, he doesn't distinguish between the cause of things and the thing that's needed by a thing to cause something. And he doesn't talk about the good that holds together all things. So Socrates said he developed his own way of, discovery to look at conceptions of things. That a thing is beautiful because it partakes of absolute beauty. That beautiful things are made beautiful by beauty. So that's where we ended on page 347. So they're still discussing the idea of immortality.
Okay, so we didn't fully prove yet, did we, that the soul is in fact immortal? That's not concretized yet, right?
No, no,
Okay.
CBs is still in doubt.
Okay, good. All right, so let me do a screen share. And you said it's page 340 that we're at?
The top of 347.
Okay, let me see if I can find that here quickly. Three, I'm getting closer. 347. Here we are. Right. Yeah. And that idea that there's these two ways of drawing your judgments of things. One leads you into more errors, and one is more grounded in reason, which is where his story of his experience as a young man looking for a competent method of analysis comes from, when he was like studying an Anaxagoras. And he's like, the bad method is to say, well, why is John taller than Bill? And the bad method would be to answer, well, he's taller because he is 13 inches taller. And then why is Bill shorter than John? Well, he's shorter because he's 13 inches shorter. Well, one, it's kind of arbitrary because, but 13 inches is also kind of small as a magnitude compared to either John or Bill. So then you're saying that somebody is smaller than, sorry, you're saying that somebody, John, is taller, bigger than Bill because of something which is small, which is the 13 inches, right? So how could something small cause something to be bigger? That's kind of absurd, and it leads you, it's not so grounded. Whereas he said, no, a more rational, reliable way of thinking about it would be to say Bill is smaller because he participates in smallness more than John does. John is larger because he participates to a greater degree in largeness as a principle than Bill does. And by answering things that way, you'll never be in principle wrong, but you could always carry out like a scalar metric that's ever more perfect, right? Like you could always measure something ever more perfectly without ever getting the exact quantitative number. That's the nature of just measurement in general. So, right. And then, but that's good, Jerry. That's good.
Okay.
So we have now somebody has to be Cebes, somebody has to be Socrates, and somebody has to be Simmias for now. Eureka, would you like to be Socrates? Eureka, I can't hear you, but I sense that you said yes. All right. Okay, let me make this bigger. Hey, Kevin, are you able to just hear, or can you also speak and hear? Kevin Kelso. Hey, Kevin, you there?
I got my hand full. I'm just going to be listening. Sorry.
No, that's good, man. Don't worry about it. All right, cool. So, all right, so we got a Socrates. Bob, you want to be Cebes?
Cebes? Okay.
Cebes. Jerry, you or me for Simius? What do we do?
Oh, I'll be Simius. No
Okay.
problem.
And any other person who comes in, I'll just jump on whatever character it is. So where should we start, Jerry?
Well, I think you just went through what they said. That we can go through it again. Where Socrates says, "And you would not accept the statement." We can start there.
Oh, I see. You're saying that I'm saying things that we haven't read yet?
No, I think we had just covered that, but it's good to go over it again
Oh, I see.
when we
Yeah,
start.
yeah, yeah. Okay. All right, cool. Let's do that.
And you would not the statement. You were told that one man is greater or smaller by a head, but you would insist that you say only that every greater thing is greater than another by nothing else than greatness, and that it is greater by reason of greatness, and that which is smaller by nothing else than smallness, and is smaller by reason of smallness. For you, I would, I think, be afraid of meeting with the retort if you said that a man was greater or smaller than another by a head. First, that the greater is greater and the smaller is smaller by the same thing. And secondly, that the greater man is greater by the head, which is small, and that it is a monstrous thing that one is great by something that is small. Would you not be afraid?
Yes, I should.
Then you would be afraid to see that 10 is more than 8 by 2, and that this is the reason it is more. You would say it is more by number and by reason of number, and a 2 measure is greater than 1 cubit measure, not by magnitude, not. For you would have the same fear.
Hey, Eureka. There's something with your microphone where your voice is coming in and out. Yeah, I don't. Is there any way you could maybe bring your mic either closer to you, or I'm not sure what would be causing the problem.
Try and fix it. Is that better?
So far, let's try. Let's keep trying it.
Well then,
Yeah. So CB said certainly.
well then, if 1 is added to 1, or if 1 is divided, you would avoid saying that the addition or the division is the cause of 2. You would exclaim loudly that you know no other way by which anything can come into existence than by participating in the proper act of each thing in which it participates. And therefore, you have no other cause of the existence of 2 than participation in duality, and things which are to be two must participate in duality, and whatever is to be one must participate in unity, and you would pay no attention to the divisions and additions and other such subtleties,
Subtleties, I think.
subtleties, leaving those you would distrust your inexperience and would be afraid, as the saying goes, of your own shadow. So you would cling to that safe of ours and would reply as I have said. If anyone attacked the principle, you would pay him no attention, and you would not reply to him until you had examined the consequences to see whether they agreed with one another or not. And when you had to give an explanation of the principle, you would give it in the same way by assuming some other principle which seemed to you the best of the higher ones, and so on until you reach one which was adequate. You would not mix things up as disputants do in talking about the mind and its consequences if you wish to discover any of the realities, or perhaps not one of them thinks or cares in the least about these things. They are so clever that they succeed in their well-being, in being well pleased with themselves, even when they mix everything up. But if you are a philosopher, I think you will do as I have said.
Hey, Eureka. I think you're just quick, Bob. Eureka, you're a wonderful reader. I really love your reading, but the microphone you're using is just not good for people listening on YouTube or online because your voice is cutting in and out. So if you're not reading along with us, it's difficult. So how about we you take a smaller role like Simius, and Jerry, since your microphone is a bit better, you do Socrates, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
And Ryan, you can be Echecrates. He's coming up.
Sounds good. I don't know how's my microphone.
You're
You guys
not
hear me well?
so far so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
Is there something wrong?
Ryan,
Yeah, go ahead.
be a Phaedo. I think there's more that Phaedo is going to say than Echecrates. So you be Phaedo, I'll be Echecrates.
Okay. Sounds good. Where are we? Which page are we on? 348.
Yeah. So that is true, says so Simius and Cebes say that is true.
That is true.
Very good.
That's great.
By Zeus, Phaedo. They were right.
Yeah. Where are we? Just give me
At
a
the
second
bottom,
because I'm trying.
Echecrates.
No, just read it
You're gonna be Phaedo. I'll be Echecrates.
from the Zoom thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So certainly Echecrates and all who were there too, and all who were there, those so too. Okay.
Okay. All right. And so, do we know? And so do we who were not there and are hearing about it now? But what was said after that?
As I remember it, after all this had been admitted, and they had agreed that each of the abstract qualities exists, and the other things which participate in these. Yeah, my mic?
Yeah.
Okay. One sec. Is this better maybe?
Try it.
Yeah?
Try it.
Okay. As I remember it, after all this had been admitted, and they had agreed that each of the abstract qualities exists, and the other things which participate in these get their names from them. Then Socrates asked, now if you assent to it.
Now, Socrates can jump in.
Okay.
Now, if you assent to this, do you not, when you say that Simius is greater than Socrates and smaller than Phaedo, say that there is in Simius greatness and smallness?
Yes.
But you agree that the statement that Simius is greater than Socrates is not true as stated in those words. For Simius is not greater than Socrates by reason of being Simius, but by reason of the greatness he happens to have. Nor is he greater than Socrates because Socrates is Socrates, but because Socrates has smallness relative to his greatness.
True.
And again, he is not smaller than Phaedo because Phaedo is Phaedo, but because Phaedo has greatness relatively to Simius's smallness.
That is true.
Then Simius is called small and great when he is between the two, surpassing the smallness of the one by exceeding him in height, and granting to the other the greatness that exceeds his own smallness. I seem to be speaking like a legal document, but it really is very much as I say.
I think
I
that's
am
still Socrates.
speaking, okay, I am speaking so because I want you to agree with me. I think it is evident not only that greatness itself will never be great and also small, but that the greatness in us will never admit the small or allow itself to be exceeded. One of two things must take place. Either it flees or withdraws when its opposite, smallness, advances toward it, or it has already ceased to exist by the time smallness comes near it. But it will not receive and admit smallness, thereby becoming other than it was. So I have received and admitted smallness and am still the same small person I was. But the greatness in me, being great, has not suffered itself to become small. In the same way, the smallness in us will never become or be great, nor will any other opposite, which is still what it was, ever become or be also its own opposite. It either goes away or loses its existence in the change.
That seems to me quite evident.
Then one of those present, I don't remember who who it was, said, "Eureka!" Just say that.
Heaven, in heaven's name, is this present doctrine the exact opposite of what was admitted in our earlier discussion, that the greater is generated from the less and the less from the greater, and that opposites are always generated from their opposites? But now it seems to me we are saying that this can never happen.
It's a good paradox. It's a good paradox. Because that was exactly what we just established, right? Earlier on, that something comes from its opposite. Your wakingness comes from the previous state, the opposite state, which was sleepingness. Sleepingness comes from the state before that of wakingness. And to be greater, you had to have been smaller. So smaller caused, greater is what we had earlier been saying, which got us into the discussion about reincarnation, that life, what comes before life? It's opposite, death. Oh, what about after? Death, afterlife. But now he's just taken us through a voyage where the opposite is true. So that's an interesting thing. How are we thinking wrong, or what was the problem in thinking in one of these two cases that resulted in both answers being logical, but they're opposite answers? It's a good thought experiment.
It's yeah, just I find it's kind of it's very intriguing in the way he puts it, because on the first hand, both of these opposites repel each other, and they can't, as he just said, they can't combine, they can't unite. They are of two completely different natures. But at the same time, saying that each one cannot live without its opposite, right? You cannot have greatness without smallness. You cannot have cold without black. So there's some sort of unity between both of them. And it's this paradox, like it's this paradox that's very sound. You see, what's the, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So let's let that just chew on that for a bit as we continue to see where is he going with this.
Okay, I think this is Socrates.
The opposites time, they're completely different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You have spoken up like a man, but you do not observe the difference between the present doctrine and what we said before. We said before that in the case of concrete things, opposites are generated from opposites, whereas now we say that the abstract concept of an opposite can never become.
Oh, sorry.
Turn the page, Matt.
Sorry.
The abstract concept can never become its own opposite, either in us or in the world about us. Then we were talking about things, which possess opposite qualities and are called after them. But now, about those very opposites, the immanence of which gives the things their names. We say that these latter can never be generated from each other.
At the same time, he looked at Cebes and said,
And you, are you troubled by any of our friends' objections?
No, not this time, though I confess that objections often do trouble me.
Well, we are quite agreed upon this, that an opposite can never be its own opposite.
Entirely agreed.
Now, see if you agree with me in what follows. Is there something that you call heat and something you call cold?
Yes?
Are they the same as snow and fire?
No, not at all.
But heat is a different thing from fire, and cold differs from snow.
Yes?
Yet I fancy you believe that snow, if, to employ the form of phrase we used before, it admits heat, will no longer be what it was, namely snow, and also warm, but will either withdraw when heat approaches it or will cease to exist.
Certainly.
sorry,
I can't. Yeah. And similarly, fire, when cold approaches it, will either withdraw or perish. It will never succeed in admitting cold and being still fire as it was before and also cold.
That is true.
The fact is, in some such cases, that not only the abstract idea itself has a right to the same name through all time, but always something else, which is not the idea, but which always, whenever it exists, has the form of the idea. But perhaps I can make my meaning clearer by some examples. In numbers, the odd must always have the name of odd, must it not?
Certainly.
But is this the only thing so called? For this is what I mean to ask. Or is there something else which is not identical with the odd, but nevertheless has a right to the name of odd in addition to its own name, because it is of such a nature that it is never separated from the odd? I mean, for instance, the number 3, and there are many other examples. Take the case of 3. Do you not think it may always be called by its own name and also be called odd, which is not the same as 3? Yet the number 3 and the number 5 and half of numbers in general are so constituted that each of them is odd, though not identified with the idea of odd. And in the same way, 2 and 4 and all the other series of numbers are even, each of them, though not identical with evenness. Do you agree or not?
Of course.
Now, see what I want to make plain. This is my point, that not only abstract opposites exclude each other, but all things which, although not opposites one to another, always contain opposites. These also, we find, exclude the idea which is opposed to the idea contained in them. And when it approaches, they either perish or withdraw. We must certainly agree that the number 3 will endure destruction or anything else rather than submit to becoming even, while still remaining 3, must we not?
Certainly.
But the number 2 is not the opposite of the number 3.
No.
Then not only opposite ideas refuse to admit each other when they come near, but certain other things refuse to admit the approach of opposites.
Very true.
Shall we then determine, if we can, what these are?
Certainly.
Then see these. Will they be those which always compel anything of which they take possession, not only to take their form, but also that of some opposite?
What do you mean?
Such things as we were speaking of just now. You know, of course, that those things in which the number 3 is an essential element must be not only 3, but also odd.
Certainly.
Now, such a thing can never admit the idea which is the opposite of the concept which produces this result.
No, it cannot.
But the result was produced by the concept of the odd.
Yes.
And the opposite of this is the idea of the even.
Yes.
Then the idea of the even will never be admitted by the number 3.
No.
Then 3 has no part in the even.
No, it is none.
Then the number 3 is uneven.
Yes.
Now I propose to determine what things, without being the opposites of something, nevertheless refuse to admit it, as the number 3, though it is not the opposite of the idea of even, nevertheless refuses to admit it, but always brings forward its opposite against it. And as the number 2 brings forward the opposite of the odd, and fire that of cold, and so forth, for there are plenty of examples. Now see if you accept this statement. Not only will opposites not admit their opposites, but nothing which brings an opposite to that which it approaches will ever admit in itself the oppositeness of that which is brought. Now let me refresh your memory, for there is no harm in repetition. The number 5 will not admit the idea of the even, nor will 10, the double of 5, admit the idea of the odd. Now 10 is not itself an opposite, and yet it will not admit the idea of the odd. And so 1.5 and other mixed fractions, and 1/3 and other simple fractions reject the idea of the whole. Do you go with me and agree to this?
Yes, I agree entirely. And am with you.
Then please begin again at the beginning. And do not answer my questions in their own words, but do as I do. I give an answer beyond that safe answer which I spoke of at first, now that I see another safe reply deduced from what has just been said. If you ask me what causes anything in which it is to be hot, I will not give you that safe but stupid answer and say that it is heat. But I can now give a more refined answer that it is fire. And if you ask what causes the body in which it is to be ill, I shall not say illness, but fever. And if you ask what causes a number in which it is to be odd, I shall not say oddness, but the number 1, and so forth. Do you understand sufficiently what I mean?
Quite sufficiently.
Now answer, what causes the body in which it is to be alive?
The soul.
Is this always the case?
Yes, of course.
Then if the soul takes possession of anything, it always brings life to it.
Certainly.
Is there anything that is the opposite of life?
Yes,
What?
death.
Now, the soul, as we have agreed before, will never admit the opposite of that which it brings with it.
Decidedly not.
Then what do we now call that which does not admit the idea of the even?
Uneven,
And those which do not admit justice and music?
unjust, and unmusical.
Well, then, what do we call that which does not admit death?
Deathless or immortal.
And the soul does not admit death?
No.
Then the soul is immortal.
Yes.
Very well. Shall we say then that this is proved?
Yes. And very satisfactorily, Socrates.
Well then, Cebes, if the odd were necessarily imperishable, would not the number 3 be imperishable?
Of course.
And if that which is without heat were imperishable, would not snow go away whole and unmelted whenever heat was brought in conflict with snow? For it could not have been destroyed, nor could it have remained and admitted the heat.
That is very true.
In the same way, I think, if that which is without cold were imperishable, whenever anything cold approached fire, it would never perish or be quenched, but would go away unharmed.
Necessarily.
And must not the same be said of that which is immortal? If the immortal is also imperishable, it is impossible for the soul to perish when death comes against it. For, as our argument has shown, it will not admit death and will not be dead, just as the number 3, we said, will not be even, and the odd will not be even, and as fire and the heat in the fire will not be cold. But one might say, why is it not possible that the odd does not become even when the even comes against it? We agreed to that, but perishes, and the even takes its place. Now, we cannot silence him who raises this question by saying that it does not perish, for the odd is not perishable, for the odd is not imperishable. If that were conceded to us, we could easily silence him by saying that when the even approaches, the odd and the number 3 go away, and we could make the corresponding reply about fire and heat and the rest, could we not?
Certainly.
And so too, in the case of the immortal, if it is conceded that the immortal is imperishable, the soul would be imperishable as well as immortal. But if not, further argument is needed.
But it is not needed so far as that is concerned, for surely nothing would escape destruction if the immortal, which is everlasting, is perishable.
All, I think, would agree that God and the principle of life and anything else that is immortal can never perish.
Right.
Mhm.
Bob, I think that's
Is
you.
that me?
Yes.
All men would certainly, and still more, I fancy, the gods.
Since then, the immortal is also indestructible, would not the soul, if it is immortal, be also imperishable?
Necessarily.
Then, when death comes to a man, His mortal part, it seems, dies, but the immortal part goes away unharmed and undestroyed, withdrawing from death.
So it seems.
Then, Cebes, it is perfectly certain that the soul is immortal and imperishable, and our souls will exist somewhere in another world.
I have nothing more to say against that, and I cannot doubt your conclusions. But if Simmias or anyone else has anything to say, he would do well to speak it. For I do not know to what other time than the present he could defer speaking, if he wishes to say or hear anything about those matters.
Eureka?
Simmias.
Am I Simius?
Oh, I forget. I don't know anymore. I think so.
But I don't see how I can doubt either as to the result of the discussion, but the subject is so great, and I have such a poor opinion of human beings that I cannot help having some doubt in my own mind about what has been said.
Not only that, Simius, but our first assumptions ought to be more carefully examined, even though they seem to you to be certain. And if you analyze them completely, you will, I think, follow and agree with the argument, so far as it is possible for man to do so. And if this is made clear, you will seek no farther.
That is true.
I can't go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's appropriate. That's totally appropriate.
Mhm. But my friends, we ought to bear in mind that if the soul is immortal, he must care for it, not only in respect to this time, which we call life, but in respect to all time. And if we neglect it, the danger now appears to be terrible. For if death were an escape from everything, it would be a boon to the wicked. For when they die, they would be freed from the body and from their wickedness together with their souls. But now, since the soul is seen to be immortal, it cannot escape from evil or be saved in any other way than by becoming as good and wise as possible. For the soul takes with it to the other world nothing but its education and nurture, and these are said to benefit or injure the departed greatly from the very beginning of his journey thither. And so it is said that after death, the tutelary genius of each person to whom he had been allotted in life leads him to a place where the dead are gathered together. Then they are judged and depart to the other world with the guide, whose task it is to conduct thither those who come from this world. And when they have there received their due and remained through the time appointed, another guide brings them back after many long periods of time. And the journey is not as Telephus says in the play of Aeschylus, for he says a simple path leads to the lower world. But I think the path is neither simple nor single, for if it were, there would be no need of guides, since no one could miss the way to any place if there were only one road. But really there seem to be many forks of the road and many windings. This I infer from the rites and ceremonies practiced here on earth. Now the orderly and wise soul follows its guide and understands its circumstances. But the soul that is desirous of the body, as I said before, flits about it and in the visible world for a long time. And after much resistance and many sufferings, is led away with violence and with difficulty by its appointed genius. And when it arrives at the place where the other souls are, the soul which is impure and has done wrong by committing wicked murders or other deeds akin to those, and the works of kindred souls, is avoided and shunned by all, and no one is willing to be its companion or its guide, but it wanders about alone in utter bewilderment during certain fixed times, after which it is carried by necessity to its fitting habitation. But the soul that has passed through life in purity and righteousness finds gods for companions and guides, and goes to dwell in its proper dwelling. Now there are many wonderful regions of the earth, and the earth itself is neither in size nor in other respects such as it is supposed to be by those who habitually discourse about it, as I believe on someone's authority.
And Simmias said,
What do you mean, Socrates? I have heard a good deal about the earth myself, but not what you believe, so I should like to hear it.
Well, Simmias, I do not think I need the art of Glaucus to tell what it is, but to prove that it is true would, I think, be too hard for the art of Glaucus, and perhaps I should not be able to do it. Besides, even if I had the skill, I think my life, Simmias, will end before the discussion could be finished. However, there is nothing to prevent my telling what I believe the form of the earth to be and the regions in it.
Well, that will be enough.
I am convinced then that in the first place, if the earth is round and in the middle of the heavens, it needs neither the air nor any other similar force to keep it from falling, but its own equipoise and the homogeneous nature of the heavens on all sides suffice to hold it in place. For a body which is in equipoise and is placed in the center of something which is homogeneous cannot change its inclination in any direction, but will remain always in the same position. This, then, is the first thing of which I am convinced.
And rightly.
Secondly, I believe that the earth is very large, and that we who dwell between the pillars of Hercules and the river Phaedo live in a small part of it about the sea, like ants or frogs about a pond, and that many other people live in many other such regions. For I believe there are in all directions on the earth many hollows of very various forms and sizes into which the water and mist and air have run together. But the earth itself is pure and is situated in the pure heaven in which the stars are, the heaven which those who discourse about such matters call the ether. The water, mist, and air are the sediment of this and flow together into the hollows of the earth. Now we do not perceive that we live in the hollows, but think we live on the upper surface of the earth, just as if someone who lives in the depth of the ocean should think he lived on the surface of the sea, and seeing the sun and the stars through the water should think the sea was the sky, and should, by reason of sluggishness or feebleness, never have reached the surface of the sea, and should never have seen, by rising and lifting his head out of the sea into our upper world, and should never have heard from anyone who had seen how much purer and fairer it is than the world he lived in. Now, I believe this is just the case with us, for we dwell in a hollow of the earth and think we dwell on its upper surface, and the air we call the heaven and think that is the heaven in which the stars move. But the fact is the same, that by reason of feebleness and sluggishness, we are unable to attain to the upper surface of the air. For if anyone should come to the top of the air, or should get wings and fly up, he could lift his head above it and see, as fishes lift their heads out of the water and see the things in our world. So he would see things in that upper world. And if his nature were strong enough to bear the sight, he would recognize that that is the real heaven and the real light and the real earth. For this earth of ours and the stones and the whole region where we live are injured and corroded, as in the sea things are injured by the brine. And nothing of any account grows in the sea, and there is, one might say, nothing perfect there, but caverns and sand and endless mud and mire, where there is earth also. And there is nothing at all worthy to be compared with the beautiful things of our world. But the things in that world above would be seen to be even more superior to those in this world of ours. If I may tell a story, Simmias, about the things on the earth that is below the heaven and what they are like, it is well worth hearing.
By all means, Socrates. We should be glad to hear this story.
Well then, my friend, to begin with, the earth, when seen from above, is said to look like those balls that are covered with 12 pieces of leather. It is divided into patches of various colors, of which the colors which we see here may be regarded as samples, such as painters use. But there, the whole earth is of such colors, and they are much brighter and purer than ours. For one part is purple of wonderful beauty, and one is golden, and one is white, whiter than chalk or snow. And the earth is made up of the other colors likewise, and they are more in number and more beautiful than those which we see here. For those very hollows of the earth, which are full of water and air, present an appearance of color as they glisten amid the variety of the other colors, so that the whole produces one continuous effect of variety. And in this fair earth, the things that grow, the trees and flowers and fruits, are correspondingly beautiful, and so too the mountains, and the stones are smoother and more transparent and more lovely in color than ours. In fact, our highly prized stones, sards and jaspers and emeralds and other gems are fragments of those there. But there everything is like these, or still more beautiful. And the reason of this is that there the stones are pure and not corroded or defiled, as ours are, and filth and brine by the vapors and liquids which flow together here, and which cause ugliness and disease in earth, in stones and animals and plants. And the earth there is adorned with all these jewels, and also with gold and silver. And
Oh, sorry. Oh.
everything of the sort. For there they are in plain sight, abundant and large, and in many places, so that the earth is a sight to make those blessed who look upon it. And there are many animals upon it, and men also, some dwelling inland, others on the coasts of the air, as we dwell about the sea, and others on islands, which the air flows around near the mainland. And, in short, what water and the sea are in our lives, air is in theirs. And what the air is to us, ether is to them. And the seasons are so tempered that people there have no diseases and live much longer than we. And in sight and hearing and wisdom and all such things are as much superior to us as air is purer than water, or the ether than air. And they have sacred groves and temples of the gods, in which the gods really dwell. And they have intercourse with the gods by speech and prophecies and visions. And they see the sun and moon and stars as they really are. And in all other ways, their blessedness is in accord with this. Such then is the nature of the earth as a whole, and of the things around it. But round about the whole earth, in the hollows of it, are many regions, some deeper and wider than that in which we live, some deeper, but with a narrower opening than ours, and some also less in depth and wider. Now, all these are connected with one another by many subterranean channels, some larger and some smaller, which are bored in all of them, and there are passages through which much water flows from one to another as into mixing bowls. And there are everlasting rivers of huge size under the earth, flowing with hot and cold water. And there is much fire and great rivers of fire, and many streams of mud, some thinner and some thicker, like the rivers of mud that flow before the lava in Sicily, and the lava itself. These fill the various regions as they happen to flow to one or another at any time. Now, a kind of oscillation within the earth moves all these up and down. And the nature of the oscillation is as follows. One of the chasms of the earth is greater than the rest, and is bored right through the whole earth. This is the one which Homer means when he says, far off, the lowest abyss beneath the earth, and which elsewhere he and many other poets have called Tartarus. For all the rivers flow together into this chasm, and flow out of it again, and they have each the nature of the earth through which they flow. And the reason why all the streams flow in and out here is that this liquid matter has no bottom or foundation. So it oscillates and waves up and down, and the air and wind about it do the same. For they follow the liquid both when it moves towards the other side of the earth and when it moves towards this side. And we need to turn the page. And just as the breath of those who breathe blows in and out, so the wind there oscillates with the liquid and causes terrible and irresistible blasts as it rushes in and out. And when the water retires to the region which we call the lower, it flows into the rivers there and fills them up, as if it were pumped into them. And when it leaves that region and comes back to this side, it fills the rivers here. And when the streams are filled, they flow through the passages and through the earth and come to the various places to which their different paths lead, where they make seas and marshes and rivers and springs. Thence they go down again under the earth, some passing around many great regions and others around fewer and smaller places, and flow again into Tartarus, some much below the point where they are sucked out, and some only a little, but all flow in below their exit. Some flow in on the side from which they flowed out, others on the opposite side, and some pass completely around in a circle, coiling about the earth once or several times like serpents, then descend to the lowest possible depth and fall again into the chasm. Now it is possible to go down from each side to the center, but not beyond. for there the slope rises upward in front of the streams from either side of the earth. Now these streams are many and great and of all sorts, but among the many are four streams, the greatest and outermost of which is that called Oceanus, which flows round in a circle, and opposite this, flowing in the opposite direction, is Acheron, which flows through.
All right.
Okay, which flows through various desert places, and passing under the earth comes to the Acherusian lake. To this lake the souls of most of the dead go, and after remaining there the appointed time, which is for some longer and for others shorter, are sent back to be born again into living beings. The third river flows out between these two, and near the place whence it issues, it falls into a vast region burning with a great fire, and makes a lake larger than our Mediterranean Sea, boiling with water and mud. Thence it flows in a circle, turbid and muddy, and comes in its winding course, among other places, to the edge of the Acherusian lake, but does not mingle with its water.
Ryan
Then,
would like to know if we want to stop and discuss anything a little bit. Since there's definitely been a shifting of the gears in modality over the past few pages. Maybe a few words. Although, does anybody know how many more pages this goes into his imagery of, or this theory of the I guess the material attributes of the netherworld and afterlife? Does this go on for a long time still?
I'm not sure. Let me check.
Have you been to Greece, Jerry?
No.
Oh, yeah. You would love it. Yeah.
It's quite a few more pages. Yeah. So Ryan, did you have any thoughts or anything so far? Since this is definitely.
Yeah, it would be nice to just because he at the beginning we're talking about opposite, right? Opposites and the unity of opposites, and also how opposites cannot, they're of completely different natures and cannot as you said, like if one approaches the other does not change in nature but just dissipates, or
Well, like a three can't become even as soon as it and remain a three. It either changes its nature and is no longer a three, or it is no longer a three, right? Yeah.
And there's also something the fact that there is this almost circularity between life, death, afterlife, birth. You mean it's a continuous circularity. It would be, and this notion of a circularity, the circle, also has like a divine, not a very. There's something perfect about the geometry of a circle that is also seen in this whole. You see this whole motion of life, death, and re-life and death again. I don't know.
Do you remember? I was very provoked how he, and this I think touches on what you just said in some way. But when he said, because I forget which character had a problem with the fact that he had said earlier on that opposites come from, like, everything comes from its opposite. Shorter comes from longer. Like, something had to be longer if it's now shorter. Something had to be slower if it is now faster. But then he says, well, the reason why we had that conclusion there and now we have this other conclusion saying that opposites cannot coexist with their opposites is because we weren't thinking about the two states of reality of concrete things in like the material domain and how they relate to the abstract things, the simple eternal substances. Like, I guess number, we had odd and even, or no, we had like, no, heat and cold, right? Like heat and cold would be the abstracts. Because if you have a fire or you have ice, the fire can disappear as the cold approximates or comes into proximity, and it expresses heat less, but heat doesn't disappear. Heat is still eternal. It's just less hot till it is no longer hot relative to the ice. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we can resolve that a little bit more than we could before.
Yeah, it comes back also to this is argument of the substance of a material world is changing. You cannot have a lasting or eternal material world. The crux of it is change. There's a continuous flux.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take that as a prerequisite, you can only live those eternal forms in between you. See, as a in a constant motion towards something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted,
Yeah, Eureka?
I wanted to ask if anyone wanted to touch on what he said about how after you die, all you take is with you is education.
Did he say that in this reading today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's kind of an interesting point. Like, you know,
And it was underlined.
Everybody's a library, and you know, you either carry it with you or you don't. And yeah, he was talking about what taking education with you. And in some cases, people that don't have it go someplace else. So it seems to be there was a concept of whether we call it hell or whatever, I don't, you know, but different destination for different people.
I found that rather interesting because there are other philosophers and teachers in history who said the same thing.
Yes.
But out of let's say, like out of the passage that we read, what are the main points that you think we should take out of it?
Well, I think what Eureka just said is very important, bringing the point up, you know, and I think everybody, regardless if you're Buddhist who believes in reincarnation or Christian or Muslim or whoever, if you have a concept that you have a soul, it can be made healthier or sicker based upon your vices or virtues that you give your love to in your life and how you use your time, that whatever the case may be after you die, there are ramifications for your eternal soul in some way, and that will cause you to think and be a different type of person in life if you have that relationship to your soul than if you were like a total existentialist with no sense whatsoever of something eternal or divine within you. And like Socrates says, you know, if death was really just dissipation and non-existence, then that would be a great boon to the wicked, because then it's like, what a relief. I could, you know, I could just, for as payment for all of my evil that I engaged in, just disappear and like
total hedonism.
Yeah. So we don't know. I mean, we can't know exactly the character of the afterworld, you know, like that's not something our minds, I think, can really know for absolute certainty, but we can know that in essence, there are ramifications for living a good life or an ill life, an evil life. The predicates or details, which is why I think it's just so interesting that he devotes so many pages to like, you know, he's painting this very colorful picture of this, you know, theory of what's inside the earth and the afterlife and all of these different predicates of rhinestones that are made pure, not rhinestones, but gemstones that are pure and all of this stuff, which it's just an interesting, I don't know whether he's being playful or what do you guys think? Like, what do you guys think because that's always kind of been a mystery to me, why he spends so much time talking about Tartarus and the rivers of the the netherworld and all of these things. Do you think he Jerry? I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he believes this, or is he being playful, or?
Well, I think he's taking a lot of it from what people at the time believed in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he wants to throw it all in the garbage can. You know, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
And so he's going through all of this and sort of putting his own ideas on it, why it is like that. That's always been my thinking.
I would think of it the same way, Jerry.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about it as being such, he's dealing with theories of the afterworld, right, that are very dominant in his world, and he's infusing reason into the psyche of the person who is reading his dialogue such that they can return to their mythologies with a reasonable foundation instead of it just being whatever, like total mysticism.
Yes, because they have this ceremonies, they call the mysteries, where they get initiated into the mysteries. But I think originally these ceremonies were done to try to give this type of morality to the population, that there is in the afterworld, you're going to have to answer for whether you were good or bad. It's not going into mysticism that we see nowadays, but it was their way of trying to explain it. Because, like you said, we really don't.
Like accountability?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
The
evil
compass.
is evil. Yes. Because if you didn't believe in immortality or the immortality of the soul, then what do you care if you are good or evil with your life? You're going to do what gives you the most, sensual pleasure, or whatever you think, every man for himself. So you have to establish this concept of the good, or like he says, the soul takes with it nothing but its education into the next life.
I'm not sure though, Jerry, that it is something that, like a reward in the next life. I think everybody's got that moral compass, but some people have it turned off, and they do go for the hedonistic life, and I don't think they're happy. I think that you find people that get everything. Just look at our politicians, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I don't think ultimately these kind of people are happy. So it's just something that
yeah, Ryan, what's up?
Yeah, but when you said there is an unspoken notion of morality, um, even though that some people have it experiences stronger than others, but at the same time, like if you take the extreme cases of that curve, sometimes you have, certain people, and even psychologists that might label them as, completely out of the spectrum, that have no sense or no notion of the good and evil or morality. It's whether you see it in serial killers or other people that have very that are completely out of the spectrum, and it makes you wonder whether morality itself is an encompassing notion.
Well, you have to look at it as something other than being relative, because that's, people thought that after Darwin there would be a breakdown of religion, and in some cases it was, because there's a concept that some people needed religion, but I think that morality exists beyond religion, with certain people going beyond that. But that was sort of the test. Otherwise, the hedonism and the nihilism that followed, and those were definitely counterproductive from a social point of view. But what makes me think of the morality, let's take atheists, for example. Atheists, there was a guy from Bangladesh, Mohammed, I forget his name. He set up what do they call it? The key. It was a key, small business loans for like small farmers, and found that if people would donate to that, and those people would actually pay off the loans, and it kind of expanded, you might say, in a pyramid actual way, but in a good way, like an inverted pyramid. And this guy, I was looking at, because I did send a small contribution, whether it was a rate, Kiva, I think it was called. And it still exists, I believe. And they would send you a sort of a review of how your person was doing, whether it was in Bangladesh or Kenya or some other place. You could pick somebody that was trying to establish himself in the trade. And the thing is, what I noticed, that people kind of grouped themselves. I just put myself down for my local community, but so people would group themselves under certain, sometimes religious factions, so whether it's Christian, Muslim. But the largest contributors, when they showed the statistics, were the atheists, which says something, about atheism. Atheists don't believe that there is anything beyond, but that doesn't make them in any way immoral. There is that morality, that moral compass there anyway. And if anybody was going to be concerned about what happens to them after, why would God care about that? God's going to care about, is he there because he wants to be praised? If we believe in the concept of God, or is he there to reward those who have established a good life and been good towards others in their life?
What do you think?
So I don't know. That's just a simplistic, maybe, but it's something that made me think of it. I think it's called Kiva, is the thing I'm talking about. I forget. It's a simple name like Muhammad something or other, and he was quite famous. He had a Nobel Prize for that at one time, and then I guess he was forgotten. But I think Kiva still exists, and I just thought it was very interesting that all these religious groups, the atheists seem to come out ahead.
It's not about what religion or what non-religion you follow. Maybe it's more about how much of the truth you follow.
Yes.
I think that's what you're saying, right, Bob?
I believe that's what I'm saying. I think it's about whether you follow what you believe is true, and truth is beauty, beauty is truth. Is what was that in the a cliche now, but some poet had said it at some point in time. But yeah.
Ode on the Grecian Urn by Keats.
Does that in some way get at what you were thinking about, Ryan, or did you want to frame your question or your thought in a different way?
By the way, may I mention that Ryan has done another really outstanding, and I'm not given to hyperbole, but outstanding essay on, I forget the name of the website. It's related to yours.
Oh, the chained views.
Yeah. It's another one on ruins in art. As related to art, I just refer you all to read it because I thought it was brilliant.
Ryan's got some gems.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
It's well deserved.
Thank you.
Where can we find this, Reed?
Thechainedmuse.com.
Okay.
I'm right.
And there's another one also that he did before that I thought was excellent. What was the name of that one, Ryan?
The Retracing the Arts?
Yes. Those two, you read them both, and I mean, I definitely related to it.
Yeah, I haven't written anything lately. Like I'm actually doing some research on it.
Well, wait till you're inspired, because you've set a standard for yourself.
Sorry, what are you doing research on?
Architecture. So I'm reading a few. So I went to the library. I got like a bunch of books, and I'm just going through all of them, and hopefully like absorbing ideas, taking down notes, and hopefully slowly some direction or a thought would like crystallize, and I'll start my writing soon.
Nice. Good.
We'll be waiting.
Thanks. I'm also, yeah, let's see, like I have this idea of creating a website basically, and also putting like different pieces of writing, but associate, like for every piece of writing I want to try to, for example, either do a voiceover or something that is a bit more visual, because I find like many people these days just don't have the time nor the inclination to read or to ponder a piece of text. So they just rather listen to something or just look at a certain visual. I don't know, maybe like associate each article with a voiceover or with like a visual.
Yeah.
Well, what you did with that first article, you did have an excellent visual. I sent it to different people, by the way, and the one, the Emile Frion that you had in that used as an illustration in the article, in your essay.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
The Emile Frion, that portrait painting that you had of the four guys who were talking like politics or something.
Émile Frion, yeah.
And I thought that was a great.
Yeah.
I never seen it before.
Yeah, it was.
But I thought it was greatly the way you used it in the illustration.
Yeah.
And if you have that facility to write the essay and then illustrate it with things like that and art, and you seem to know quite a bit about art, so that's a good way to go, I think, because I think you would have a following.
Well, you definitely have guaranteed one
serious
fan who commit to it.
There you go.
Exactly.
Well, that sounds like a good little project, Ryan. I would also vote for Bob's suggestion that you compose a little video or something. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Definitely, we would be happy to showcase that on the Rising Tide site as well. I'm just thinking here, do we have time to finish this dialogue? What do we think? I don't know how much longer it goes. But I mean, right now we're in the Jerry, you're on mute. I hear you. I see your mouth moving, but
I'm sorry.
it's okay.
The dialogue goes to page 403.
403?
What are we on?
Oh my.
We've
We
we've read about
And all this with a glass of hemlock in his hand, huh?
well, that's the thing.
Jerry,
See, I
Jerry,
would
put
like,
it down.
I would like to ideally get to the end of it. I just don't know if we'll have time tonight since that's a lot of pages.
Probably not. Yeah.
you can try.
We can try. Let's give it a shot. I mean, it would be a shame to not get closure on the most important day of many people's lives around Socrates. So what page did we stop at before we did our?
Maybe Jerry as a suggestion of where we should pick it up again instead of reading the whole thing, because he was going into the underworld with serpents and stings that were,
Yeah.
you know, part of the mythology of the time. So, Jerry? Is there any specific text that you think would be best to hone in on?
I don't know. We'll just read it all and see what we think.
Yeah, let's just go for
Okay.
it. Let's just go for it. Yeah. So was it here? Was it this page 387 or?
I think it was. We were talking about oscillations. I remember that.
Let's go to the previous page. I mean, it's
Okay.
it ends to go down to yeah. Let's go for now. These are streams are many and great. You want to do that?
Okay.
All right,
That sounds
let's go
good.
for it. Yeah.
Now, these streams are many and great and of all sorts. But among the many are four streams, the greatest and outermost of which is that called Oceanus, which flows round in a circle. And opposite this, flowing in the opposite direction, is Acheron, which flows through.
Oh, we totally read this.
Yep, flows through various desert places. Oh, you went too far.
Sorry.
There are various desert places, and passing under the earth comes to the Acherusian lake. To this lake the souls of most of the dead go, and after remaining there the appointed time, which is for some longer and for others shorter, are sent back to be born again into living beings. The third river flows out between these two, and near the place where it issues, it falls into a vast region burning with a great fire and makes a lake larger than our Mediterranean Sea, boiling with water and mud. Thence it flows in a circle, turbid and muddy, and comes in its winding course, among other places, to the edge of the Acherusian lake, but does not mingle with its water. Then, after winding about many times underground, it flows into Tartarus at a lower level. This is the river which is called Pyriphlegethon, and the streams of lava which spout up at various places on earth are offshoots from it. Opposite this, the fourth river issues, it is said, first into a wild and awful place, which is all of a dark blue color, like lapis lazuli. This is called the Stygian River, and the lake which it forms by flowing in it is the Styx. And when the river has flowed in here and has received fearful powers into its waters, it passes under the earth, and circling round in the direction opposed to that of the Pyriphlegethon, it meets it coming from the other way in the Acherusian lake. And the water of this river also mingles with no other water, but this also passes round in a circle and falls into Tartarus, opposite Pyriphlegethon. And the name of this river, as the poet said, is Cocytus. Such is the nature of these things. Now, when Now, when the dead have come to this place, where each is led by his genius, first they are judged and sentenced, as they have lived well and piously or not. And those who are found to have lived neither well nor ill go to the Acheron, and embarking upon vessels provided for them, arrive in them at the lake. There they dwell and are purified, and if they have done any wrong, they are absolved by paying the penalty for their wrongdoings, and for their good deeds they receive rewards, each according to his merits. But those who appear to be incurable, on account of the greatness of their wrongdoings, because they have committed many great deeds of sacrilege, or wicked and abominable murders, or any other such crimes, are cast by their fitting destiny into Tartarus, whence they never emerge. Those, however, who are curable, but are found to have committed great sins, who have, for example, in a moment of passion, done some act of violence against father or mother, and who have lived in repentance the rest of their lives, or who have slain some other person under similar conditions, these must needs be thrown into Tartarus. And when they have been there a year, the wave casts them out. The homicides, by way of cocytus, those who have outraged their parents, by way of pyrphlegathon. And when they have been brought by the current to the Acherusian lake, they shout and cry out, calling to those whom they have slain or outraged, begging and beseeching them to be gracious and to let them come out into the lake. And if they prevail, they come out and cease from their ills. But if not, they are borne away again to Tartarus and thence back into the rivers. And this goes on.
Sorry.
And this goes on until they prevail upon those whom they have wronged. For this is the penalty imposed upon them by the judges. But those who are found to have excelled in holy living are freed from these regions within the earth and are released as from prisons. They mount upward into their pure abode and dwell upon the earth. And of these, all who have duly purified themselves by philosophy live henceforth altogether without bodies, and pass to still more beautiful abodes, which it is not easy to describe, nor have we now time enough. But Simmias, because of all these things which we have recounted, we ought to do our best to acquire virtue and wisdom in life, for the prize is fair and the hope great. Now, it would not be fitting for a man of sense to maintain that all this is just as I have described it, but that this, or something like it, is true concerning our souls and their abodes. Since the soul is shown to be immortal, I think he may properly and worthily venture to believe. For the venture is well worth while, and he ought to repeat such things to himself as if they were magic charms, which is the reason why I have been lengthening out the story so long. This then is why a man should be of good cheer about his soul, who in his life has rejected the pleasures and ornaments of the body, thinking they are alien to him and more likely to do him harm than good, and has sought eagerly for those of learning, and after adorning his soul with no alien ornaments, but with its own proper adornment of self-restraint and justice, and
Right.
next, and courage and freedom and truth, awaits his departure to the other world, ready to go when fate calls him. You, Simmias, and Cebes, and the rest, will go hereafter, each in his own time. But I am now already, as a tragedian would say, called by fate, and it is about time for me to go to the bath, for I think it is better to bathe before drinking the poison, that the woman may not have the trouble of bathing the corpse.
When he had finished speaking, Credo, Bob, said,
Well, Socrates, do you wish to leave any directions with us about your children or anything else? Anything we can do to serve you?
What I always say, Credo, nothing new. If you take care of yourselves, you will serve me and mine and yourselves, whatever you do, even if you make no promises now. But if you neglect yourselves and are not willing to live following step by step, as it were, in the path marked out by our present and past discussion, you will accomplish nothing, no matter how much or how eagerly you promise at present.
We will certainly try hard to do as you say, but how shall we bury you?
However you please, if you can catch me and I do not get away from you, I cannot persuade Crito, my friends, that the Socrates who is now conversing and arranging the details of his argument is really I. He thinks I am the one whom he will presently see as a corpse, and he asks how to bury me. And though I have been saying at great length that after I drink the poison I shall no longer be with you, but shall go away to the joys of the blessed you know of, he seems to think that was idle talk uttered to encourage you and myself. So give security for me to Crito, the opposite of that which he gave the judges at my trial. For he gave security that I would remain, but you must give security that I shall not remain when I die, but shall go away, so that Crito may bear it more easily, and may not be troubled when he sees my body being burnt or buried, or think I am undergoing terrible treatment, and may not say at the funeral that he is laying out Socrates, or following him to the grave, or burying him. For, dear Crito, you may be sure that such wrong words are not only undesirable in themselves, but they infect the soul with evil. No, you must be of good courage and say that you bury my body, and bury it as you think best and as seems to you most fitting.
When he said this, he got up and went into another room to bathe. Crito followed him, but he told us to wait. And so we waited, talking over with each other and discussing the discourse we had heard, and then speaking of the great misfortune that had befallen us, for we felt that he was like a father to us, and that when bereft of him, we should pass the rest of our lives as orphans. And when he had bathed and his children had been brought to him, for he had 2 little sons and 1 big one, and the women of the family had come, he talked with them in Crito's presence and gave them such directions as he wished. Then he told the women to go away, and he came to us. And it was now nearly sunset, for he had spent a long time within. And he came and sat down fresh from the bath. After that, not much was said, and the servant of the 11 came and stood beside him and said, Ryan the servant? Ryan the servant, are you there?
Yeah, one second, sorry. I got distracted. I was just doing something. Right, where's the servant? He
Do
burst
you see
into...
my mouse? Do you see my mouse?
Okay.
Right there. Socrates.
Okay. The servant of the 11. Okay. Socrates, I shall not find fault with you, as I do with others, for being angry and cursing me. When at the behest of the authorities, I tell them to drink the poison. No, I have found you in all this time in every way the noblest and gentlest and best man who has ever come here. And now I know your anger is directed against others, not against me. For you know who are to blame. Now, for you, you know the message I came to bring you. Farewell, and try to bear what you must as easily as you can.
And he burst into tears and turned and went away. And Socrates looked up at him and said,
Fare you
Fare you
well.
well too.
no,
I will
Jerry
do as
Socrates.
you- Fare you well too. I will do as you say.
And then he said to us,
How charming the man is. Ever since I've been here, he has been coming to see me and talking with me from time to time, and has been the best of men. And now how nobly he weeps for me. But come, Crito, let us obey him, and let someone bring the poison if it is ready, and if not, let the man prepare it.
and Crito said, Bob Crito,
But I think, Socrates, the sun is still upon the mountains and has not yet set. And I know that others have taken the poison very late, after the order has come to them, and in the meantime have eaten and drunk the same drunk, and some of them enjoyed the society of those whom they loved. Do not hurry, for there is still time.
Crito, those whom you mention are right in doing as they do, for they think they gain by it. And I shall be right in not doing as they do, for I think I should gain nothing by taking the poison a little later. I should only make myself ridiculous in my own eyes if I clung to life and spared it, when there is no more profit in it. Come, do as I ask and do not refuse.
Thereupon Crito nodded to the boy who was standing near. The boy went out and stayed a long time, then came back with the man who was to administer the poison, which he brought with him in a cup ready for use. And when Socrates saw him, he said,
Well, my good man, you know about these things. What must I do?
Eureka?
Nothing except drink the poison and walk about till your legs feel heavy. Then lie down, and the poison will take the effect of itself.
At the same time, he held out the cup to Socrates. He took it, and very gently, Echecrates, without trembling or changing color or expression, but looking up at the man with wide open eyes, as was his custom, said,
What do you say
no, this
about
is
pouring?
Socrates.
Oh, what do you say about pouring a libation to some deity from this cup? May I or not?
Now it's Eureka.
Socrates, we prepare only as much as we think is enough.
I understand, but I may and must pray to the gods that my departure hence be a fortunate one. So I offer this prayer, and may it be granted.
With these words, he raised the cup to his lips and very cheerfully and quietly drained it. Up to that time, most of us had been able to restrain our tears fairly well, but when we watched him drinking and saw that he had drunk the poison, we could do so no longer. But in spite of myself, my tears rolled down in floods, so that I wrapped my face in my cloak and wept for myself. For it was not him that I wept, but for my own misfortune in being deprived of such a friend. Crito had gotten up and gone away even before I did, because he could not restrain his tears. But Apollodorus, who had been weeping all the time before, then wailed aloud in his grief and made us all break down, except for Socrates himself. But he said,
What conduct is this, you strange men? I sent the women away chiefly for this very reason, that they might not behave in this absurd way. For I have heard that it is best to die in silence. Keep quiet and be brave.
Then we were ashamed and controlled our tears. He walked about, and when he said his legs were heavy, lay down on his back, for such was the advice of the attendant. The man who had administered the poison laid his hands on him, and after a while examined his feet and legs, then pinched his foot hard and asked if he felt it. He said,
No.
then after that, his thighs, and passing upwards. In this way, he showed us that he was growing cold and rigid. And again he touched him and said that when it reached his heart, he would be gone. The chill had now reached the region about the groin, and uncovering his face, which had been covered, he said, and these were his last words,
Credo, we owe a cock to Esculapius. Pay it and do not neglect.
Bob Cooper.
That shall be done. But see if you have anything else to say.
To this question he made no reply, but after a little while he moved. The attendant uncovered him, his eyes were fixed, and Credo, when he saw it, closed his mouth and eyes. Such was the end, Echecrates, of our friend, who was, as we may say, of all those of his time whom we have known, the best and wisest and most righteous man. Aren't you guys happy that we finished it?
Made it.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was. I wondered how long that would take, but didn't take that long.
Yeah, no, I'd forgotten. I forgot that we skipped 2 pages, right, for every 1 page, because there's Greek.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love the parting words after this amazing dialogue and this just incredible grand use of reason to then, just end with the consideration of a debt you owed of a chicken to your neighbor. I just love it.
Obviously, it's because obviously he believes that if he doesn't pay the debt before he passes away, then he'll be answering for it afterwards, right?
Yeah, you wanted to
still has a debt.
I think it's more on it has to do with the role of comedy, because if you think about, so what is comedy? You're laughing at the unknown. You're laughing when you crack a joke about something. It's both of you have a notion of that thing that you don't grasp. It's the opposite of tragedy. Tragedy is more you're suffering life, you're living it, and you're feeling it, and you're suffering. Comedy, it's more both of you're pointing at something, at the absurd, at the something that reason, at that thing where reason lapses. You see. So it's after this. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Are you saying that that's how you see the last words of Socrates?
Yeah, exactly. Because
I think it has an element of it, but I think what Eureka's saying is also true. I think that there's Socrates is, and Plato is naturally a very funny. Plato's a very funny person. He plants tongue-in-cheek punchlines and little things like that all over the place. But in this case, he often has it also infused with higher meaning too, which I think he does well here.
Yeah, it goes back. It's like what is. It goes back to say, like, what is comedy for you? Like, what's the difference between comedy and tragedy? Like, why didn't he depart with like a very tragic note or something?
That's a big question. I mean, that's a serious line of discussion you want to open up there. Like huge. You want to do that?
No, just to get your.
I like the explanation. I often wondered about that myself because I've seen them used differently, and I guess in literature they have a specific definition that I have forgotten if I ever knew it.
Well, are they opposites, or are they like Plato or Socrates talking about how opposites can't coexist? As soon as something is its opposite, it's no longer its essence, it changes. is that how you think of comedy and tragedy, or do you think that they're two sides of the same thing?
No, it made me think about because the book by what's it called? Oh God, what can it? Bergson. Henri Bergson, the
Oh,
French.
Bergson, yeah.
Yeah, Bergson. So I think he writes a book on laughter in of itself, which is it's a book I read a long time back. After you reread it, it tries to understand the notion what comedy is and the role that it plays. And he tries to uh, to see the different. He tries to reason what the difference between comedy and tragedy is.
Are you asking this? Do you think that what we just read with the death of Socrates, do you think that this was a tragedy or a comedy or both or neither?
It was. Uh, it's nor a tragedy. It's not a tragedy nor a comedy. It's a platonic dialogue which tries to paint a picture uh, of of the immortality of the soul and create an entire structure around it. Um, but at the but it tells a lot. The fact that he uses comedy and a very um, uh, yeah, just a very naive sense of comedy at the end of a very tragic story, the death of Socrates, which is one of the biggest figures of Western philosophy, uh, points to something. No,
I I I think so. But at the same time, do you think that the where do you think the tragedy is located in the death of Socrates? Is it because this good man died, or because he didn't? If you ask Socrates, would Socrates have said he's living in a tragedy, or that this was a tragedy, or would he be happy? Would he characterize what just happened as something positive and not tragic?
um,
Because he seemed
it would be
happy to be.
interesting it would be interesting to see what uh, because tragedy is the process of living the horrors of existence and going through
Oh.
the you mean
I mean,
uh
you keep on repeating that. I don't necessarily know if I've been persuaded that that's what tragedy is, but that's one
Can I
definition that you say. Yeah,
can I, can I give
sure,
my take on this?
sure, Eureka.
The tragedy that you're asking for, what I see is that Socrates, because he symbolizes the truth, and I think that's why these men wept. It wasn't about weeping for him, but it was how much closer they got to the truth through Socrates. And for me, it's the purification, the bathing, kind of goes hand in hand with the Socrates bathing, symbolizing purification and truth. Because in many cultures, you bathe the dead people, and I find that most interesting that he went to bathe.
Beforehand, yeah.
I liked why he was bathing because it was a very giving dialogue, right? You'd imagine the last day of your life, you probably wouldn't see yourself giving hours and hours to a dialogue with a bunch of people about philosophy. You'd probably maybe spend your time differently, but he was very generous in that last day, and giving. And yet the reason why he chose to bathe, he was also very giving, right? He was considerate because he's like, I don't want the women to have to go through the trouble of bathing me after I die. So he's still thinking of other people more than himself in both cases, for the spirit as well as for even for his body. He was still like thinking of others first.
That's actually a very good point. That's a part of it.
Right.
The consideration of others, and then taking care of the debt.
I think it's a good point too. Yeah.
it's yes I think you guys bring up a very good point, but I'm most curious as to why also, for example, other massive works of literature, of Western literature, have the, for example, if you look at, I don't know, Dante's, he calls it Divine Comedy. Why would he call such a work?
Hmm.
Yeah, why would comedy go in such a dense and you mean almost awesome work? You see, there's something about comedy that.
It's a good question. It's something I've never really understood myself in that instance. Where does comedy arise? Are in that because there are similarities in some ways to what we just went through. I mean, in terms of what happens to the soul for somebody who really is wicked versus somebody who does wickedness in a heat of passion and has a different type of punishment if they feel repentance, which is sort of like the purgatorio, where they then have a chance to get out of it, versus somebody who's truly virtuous. So Socrates did sort of touch upon the themes and motifs that Dante explores in greater detail. I don't know why it's called a comedy, though. I've never quite figured that out.
There's also the thing that he was at peace with himself, which showed the very lines before. He no sense prolonging it anymore. It's he was obviously somebody that was at peace with himself, which you could see in other different scenarios where people have like nothing to fear from death. Mm-hmm. So you had the example, for instance, of de Gaulle when he was he had gone through with the jackals tried to shoot him down. His response was, "Too bad, it would have been a nice exit." He had a sense of theater, and somebody that's at peace with themselves. Kennedy had that fatalistic idea too about going to Dallas. If you read Brothers, Talbot's book, that was his brother Bobby had tried to talk him out of it, and a lot of people around him tried to talk him out of it, but he felt that he had to go there to show that he was at peace with himself first of all, that he was fatalistic. Also he needed the votes. He thought he had to get Texas, and as it was, Texas got him. But it's still, he had that sense of fatalism, and a lot of people. Martin Luther King had that sense of fatalism. He just came out. His probably undoing was his speech on Vietnam, the Beyond Vietnam speech, where he came out and called the end of the war, identified with the South Vietnamese and as the victims. I think there are quite a few cases of that, and it happens to people that have some kind of a moral compass to begin with.
Yeah.
That's it.
And they were willing to make these sacrifices. Mm-hmm. Sacrifice?
Yeah, they were willing to be sacrificed, for a larger cause.
Okay. There's a lot of people, existentialists that I've interacted with over the years, who all sort of said the same thing, that they would treat the lives of Martin Luther King or Kennedy as being tragic lives, or at best delusional lives, that these were people who were delusional because they believed in something higher, which really their death proves that they were wrong. And it's like there's actually a lot of people who take that lesson out of that experience. They're that little souls, right?
You just killed it for me, Matthew.
It's sad that people think that way, but when you listen to like Martin Luther King, he gave a really great speech where he describes how if you don't have a cause that you're willing to die for, that means you also have a life that's not really worth living for. And how many people without a purpose to their lives live to a ripe old age of 90, but they've died when they were 30. And he said, I'd love to live to an ripe old age, but I wouldn't sacrifice my immortality for my mortality. And it's good. Like he had a really, you could see it wasn't superficial. He really thought this through. Like he really took the time to go deeper than most people did to think about this.
And I think, as you said, Matt, and also Bob, most of these figures, they have a very acute sense of mortality, of what it you mean of, and also comparing their life, yeah, just the sense of your life will one day end.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us don't have that. Like you don't think of that. Most people just don't think of it.
No.
Uh,
No.
but yeah, some people have a very, very acute sense of mortality and of death, and ponder it enormously, and it gives great significance to their lives, because when you're that sensitive to such an issue, like uh, it has, yeah, it has a very big impact on your direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it puts things in perspective if you really,
Yeah.
and it's not so scary if it's scary at first before you take the time to think about it, but when you really start thinking about it, it becomes less and less scary the more you take the Socrates approach as well.
Yeah, it's
Peace of mind.
Yeah, like it's gonna happen. You can't avoid that reality. So since it's inevitable for all of us, why not take as much time as possible to think it through, right? Instead of just running away from it
And he
until
was
you're like,
among his friends. He was among his friends,
yeah.
and you know,
A lot of people only start thinking about this when they're like in their 90s and they're like sitting in the hospital bed thinking, oh shit, I probably should have prepared for this moment a lot sooner. Damn.
I wanted to ask Ryan. I wanted to ask you about what you just said. Is what you mean like more about the certainty of the afterlife, where these people are exceptional
no,
in that sense?
no. I just mean that they have a very acute sensitive sense for death, for the question of death. So it's as though it's as though they know its presence, as to you mean they feel its presence much more deeply than we do, and as such, they are forced to ponder upon it, and it completely shapes the way they think about things, the way they direct their lives, the values they set for themselves, the direction they take. Yeah.
But how can they feel a strong presence of it when they don't feel a strong presence of an afterlife, like the immortality of the soul?
Not of immortality, but just the notion that that death is inevitable, that it is part of your passing. For us, I mean, as I said, like most of us just don't have the sense, and we just get it maybe at the age of 90 years old, a few years before death, and we might start thinking about it. But other people, um, yeah, it's I don't know.
Also, what you're basically saying is that they're realistic about death and they're not living delusionally, where they think in their mind that they're gonna live forever. They're
No,
actually realistic
no,
about it.
not in an egotistical sense, as though that I want to somehow create superpowers to overcome this and keep on living my. But just thinking of it in a sense that it gives you reflection about your current being and your current yeah about your current self in a way, and makes you understand your current self much more.
So guys, this is a very, very good thing to go through. I'm really happy we did this. And I put out a challenge to people who listen to Rogue News to read the Phalebus dialogue on good and evil by Plato. And I've got a few people who said that they were going to read it. And I said, as a gift, they're all going to get free copies of the Clash of the Two Americas, Volume 1. So we'll see. I'm trying to get young people to read this. Well, I'll let you guys know next week if I've got. I said for everybody who gives me their thoughts, they get a free book. So we'll see. I'll let you guys know. It's an experiment. But next week, I think Quan will have a dialogue by Mencius prepared, or a multi-log by Mencius. So that should be fun. I've never read anything serious by Mencius before, so it's going to be new. And I think Mencius lived the same period as Plato, almost exactly. So doubly interesting.
Oh wow, well, who's I never heard of Mencius.
He's sort of like Plato, as Plato was to Socrates, so was Mencius. So was Mencius to Confucius.
Oh, okay. That'd be super interesting. Where can I find the PDF?
I'll ask Quan to send it to all of us. I don't know which translation he's using.
And what's going to be on for Sunday, Matt?
Quan again. We'll be going through Sun Yat-sen to the New Silk Road on Chinese statecraft.
All right.
Yes.
Excellent.
Right.
Excellent.
Okay, so good night, everyone.
Good night, y'all.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye. Ciao.
See you next week.
Okay. Take care, guys.
Bye, folks.
Okay, Bob.